Hi, this is Arnie, and today I'm going to be looking at a listening test, section 1, uh, going through the 10 questions and hopefully giving you some tips on how to answer the questions. So let's get into it. Okay, so you got your question booklet, the recording is started, and you will hear a voice giving you some instructions, telling you about how many sections in the test there are, and that the recording will only be played once, and that you need to transfer your answers to the answer sheet at the end. Then they will go on to tell you you can now turn to section 1. So turning to section 1, this is what you will see. The voice will go on to tell you that this is the only part of the test where you will see an example being done for you. The example is right here. So what should you do right after the voice stops talking to you? Now, the most important thing that you will hear is the introduction. In the introduction, they tell you something about the speakers you are going to hear and also something about the topic, what it is they're talking about. So in this case, it's between a speaker who wants to hire a public room and some public official in charge of this public room. It's important to keep this in mind because this information will definitely help you when you have to answer the questions. Now, sections 1 to 3 are all broken up into 2 parts. And in this case, here in our section 1, you will have some time, about 30 seconds, to look at question 1 to 6. And then you'll have another 30 seconds to look at your question sheet before you need to answer questions 7 to 10. So if we look at this, what is important to note is, of course, the heading, hiring a public room. But even before we get to that, what's important is to look at the instructions. If it says 1 word and you write 2 words, you will get no marks for that. So please follow the instructions carefully. Then we will also note that the different parts of the recording are labeled by these subheadings. So it's a good idea to look at this in the very, very short time you have, 30 seconds. Now, when we have a question like this is a very typical question of section 1, note completion, where you just have to fill in the missing words. Very common question in section 1. Now, what you need to do in the 30 seconds you have when you can look at the question sheet before the recording starts is to predict the answers. So let's have a look at what's going on here in question 1, for example. Here we will see that this R in room is capitalized. So what does that tell you? That tells you this is probably going to be a name, since names are capitalized. For question number 2, well, that's pretty easy. We see the pound sign, so this is probably going to be a number. Number 3, some kind of payment is required. Well, how do people pay for things? Either cash, credit card, something like that. Number 4, here it says the cost includes the use of, well, here we have tables, chairs, noun, and also, so it's going to be a noun, we know that. In fact, most of the questions throughout the IELTS test require nouns as answers. Now for number 5, before the event, so if you want to hire this room, you need some license. This question is too difficult to try to predict, so I would suggest just moving on to number 6. So for number 6, we see here Mr. Evans, the caretaker. You need to arrange. This one also is too hard to try to predict what it could be, because it could honestly be anything. So here, where it's really difficult to figure out what to predict, just take license and, for example, arrange as keywords to listen out for. Now, of course, with keywords, you might not hear the exact same word in the recording. They might use a synonym or they might use a paraphrase. But where it's too hard to try to guess what the answer is going to be, or to predict what the answer is going to be, just take some keywords and think about some possible synonyms. Okay, so after the first part of section 1 is finished, you'll have another 30 seconds to look at questions 7 to 10. So here, the following subheadings we have to work with. We have things that happen during the event and things that happen after the event. So keep those in mind. Now, question number 7. The band should use the door at the back. Very difficult to try to predict what the answer could be. So let's just use door as a keyword. For question number 8, you need to know something for the cleaning cupboard. Now, from my experience with this particular test, the problem here is perhaps with the word cupboard and the way that it's pronounced in the recording. Because of the speaker's accent, I find that a lot of students cannot actually make out the word he's saying. The word he's saying is cupboard, but when you hear him say the word, it might actually sound like something different. Now, for number 9, we see things that need to be washed. That's pretty simple. And for question number 10, things that need to be taken down. So the only real difficult question, I think, would be number 8, but this is more of a language problem than a skills problem. It's not about test-taking skills, like being able to identify keywords or anything like that. It's just simply a language issue where a lot of people are not familiar with the particular pronunciation of the word cupboard. Okay, so here are the answers from 1 to 10. Difficult one is probably number 8, the code. And I think it has a lot to do with that pronunciation of the word cupboard. So if you got better than 9 out of 10 for this exercise, I think well done. And again, just note, answers are all nouns. Now, test-taking skills and acquiring more test-taking skills is of course fine. You should definitely do that. But as IELTS is a proficiency test, if you really want a good score, let's say in listening or reading, in the receptive skills, what you really need to do is work on your language. So for those requiring a 7 or a 7.5 or higher, I think test-taking skills by themselves is probably not going to be good enough to get you the score that you're looking for. So suggestions, yeah, give yourself some exposure to recordings using different accents. There are plenty of those available on the internet. CNN Student or Student CNN or something similar to that, or the BBC. I'm not sure if they have a student edition, or just listening to the BBC broadcasting, or podcasts. There are millions of podcasts out there. So language skills definitely important, especially if you're aiming at a higher band score.